Good morning, welcome to the Max. If you're new to our channel, go down here, press subscribe, ring the bell because there's always something going on here at the farm, from the vlogs to the how-tos, and hopefully you're enjoying all of them. Today is a beautiful day. We've gotten done with all the milking chores, moved the cows back, and it's time to start our normal chores. We're going to be talking about a great subject, and one that I think is very pertinent to the times that we live in. 3 ways to make our gardens more survivable, but also self-sustaining. It allows us to know that we're not going to be affected by the things that sometimes the shortages bring, such as the food shortage or the seed shortage or the fertilization shortage, or the inflation that we're seeing in our world, to say, okay, well, this crop now is going to cost me double what it did last year because we have to put all these amendments in it. We've got to do all these things to the garden to make sure it's ready for next year. 3 tips that makes our survival garden more self-sustainable and actually almost free. Let's start right now. All right, guys, let's get started. We're going to go to the rabbits and chickens like we always do, and we're going to talk about the kitchen garden and point number 1. So number 1, let's talk about seed. Seed saving is huge. The way we grow our slips for our sweet potatoes, the way we keep our tubers for our regular potatoes, the way we actually save seed, we let things die on vine to turn around and give us life for next year. So when we plant for next year, not just for food, but for seed saving too. If you have been a part of this world for the last 2 years, you've realized how hard it was to get some of the seeds that you wanted either ordered or just bought at your local Walmart or supermarket, because there may have been a seed shortage, there may have been a situation where the pandemic wouldn't allow you to buy it or the government wouldn't allow you to buy it. So let's talk about the main way to grow a garden self-sufficiently and self-sustainable and in a survival mentality is you save your seed. You have to find ways and means and wisdom to understand the value of saving seed. If we know we like corn, or we know we like green beans, or we know we like lima beans, or we know we like these herbs or those herbs, and this video is not going to touch on each individual thing, but it allows you to say, you know what, if we're growing these 5 things, we need to find out how to make sure they're going to be here for next year, that we're not depending on the seeds from the co-op or to order from seed companies, even though those are great things to do, and we order some seeds too. But we can't get in the mentality that 100% of our seeds that we are planting for next year is solely dependent on the seed savers themselves or the companies that grow the seed. Because ultimately, if you can't get those seed, you have no garden, you provide nothing for your family. So being a gardener is one part of it, but saving the seeds to make the garden for the next few years is bigger and better. You know, the old cliche statement that gets on everybody's nerves, but it's so true. I can give you a fish and you can eat, but if I teach you to fish, you can fish for a lifetime and feed your family for a lifetime.
He's very smart, he's very intelligent.
So it's very cliche, but very threadbare and thorough to say, you know what? If we learn to save the seed, we are not dependent on buying those seed to make sure we have gardens for next year. If we have the biggest harvest of corn, potatoes, basil, tomatoes, whatever we're growing this year, that's great. We could eat this year and we can enjoy putting food up for preserving it, but ultimately that's not going to give us years and years and years of food. Saving seed will allow us to not only have the harvest this year, but the years to come. So I challenge you, learn seed saving, gain wisdom from whatever you're wanting to grow, because ultimately that provides the beautiful gardens we're growing now, but also the next few years. For instance, let's look at this. We've already harvested our carrots for consumption. This is what's left of the carrots of consumption. All these seeds were from our carrots last year. You see they're all growing here, but what is this one doing? Whoa, wait, what is this carrot doing? They are growing to provide the abundance that we're not using now for eating live or preserving. They're growing for next year's garden. They're seeding out, and they're allowing us to know that we will have carrots not only now, not only in 6 months when we can't grow carrots, we'll have them for a lifetime. Secondly, have you priced out fertilization or amendments lately for your gardens? Whoa! they're expensive. So, second point is grow your own fertilizer. Now, what does that mean? How can you grow your own fertilizer? How can you grow those little pelletized, synthesized, GMO raised fertilizers? Well, I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about the natural sources that many people have used over the years. When we think about the Great Depression and we think about our grandparents and great-grandparents and what they did to take care of their families, they didn't have pelletized lime or pelletized nitrogen or pelletized potash. Or I'm not saying I condemn you for using those things. I just choose not to use those. But also look at the money that it's costing. Some of those things are triple the price of what they were last year, which are double the price they were the year before. I remember when I was younger, when we were doing deer fields and things like that, and even cattle fields and ryegrass fields, you could buy a bag of triple 13 or triple 8 for nothing. I mean, it was just dirt cheap. Now that price is, I mean, it's expensive. And if you're doing big fields, you can't afford it. If you're doing big cash crops, it's hard to afford it. So therefore, your food price is going up at the supermarket because people are having to use all these synthetic fertilizers to take care of growing all their vegetables that you're gonna eat. So let's take that out. Let's don't worry about that anymore. How can we grow these beautiful crops without putting fertilizers? I hear it all the time, and I get the most questions of, man, I can't imagine. It's so hard to grow a garden this year. We can't grow our tomatoes, or we can't grow our squash because we don't have the fertilizers, or it's gonna cost us triple. It hasn't affected us. The reason we can grow, I mean, look at these squash plants and these zucchini plants. Look at this rosemary, these onions. Look at those onions. There has been no fertilization bought from a store that's synthetic and man-made that we've had to use on those gardens. It's all because we raise animals like this, where you have chickens going through bedding and they're making all this beautiful compost to break down. If you don't have animals, okay, we use rabbits and chickens. If you don't have that, find a farmer who would give you tons of either chicken bedding or rabbit bedding, or ways to find it, or you know, barter some things. Say, hey, let me grow this for you if we can have the manure of your cattle. Break it down in compost. Build your compost beds. We actually have those gardens all over here, and we'll show it to you close up in just a second. All those gardens were made with compost that we've had from broken down old, you know, things like newspaper, cardboard, nitrogen, grass clippings, all those things, spent hay. All those ways can make fresh compost that doesn't cost you anything. You need to learn how to make compost because you don't want to heat up and also not heat up enough, and then you've got grass growing in your beds, or you don't let it break down enough and you've got it too rich of nitrogen because the manure hadn't broken down. You need to learn how to do that. But say we're harvesting chickens, we're going to use their feathers, we're going to use their blood, we're going to use their bones to turn around and add to making bone meal, blood meal, feather meal. We're going to have the broken down parts of the greens that we're not eating, we're going to use for chop and drop, which will help us have biomass, which will help us have earthworms coming in. We raise earthworms. If you're not raising anything, if people say, oh, I can't raise animals for fertilization, there's no way I could do that. Everybody can have a worm bin. Vermiculture and having worms, red wiggler worms, are so easy. You do nothing. It costs you nothing. And worm castings literally are expensive if you're buying them from the store, but one of the best compost that you can have. Look at mushroom farming, things like that. Be innovative on how you're going to become a way to provide your own fertilization. But remember, the fertilization is what's so expensive when it comes to growing. Studies show that other than actually hard working a garden and not taking care of it by keeping the weeds out, the other hardest part is having abundance and having the gardens make it because you hadn't fertilized, or it's deficient of something, it's missing something. Well, if you're building quality soil by compost, you're building quality soil by additives such as natural manures, if you're building quality soil by having worms there, or you know, encouraging worms, if you have bees and bees are pollinating, all that is making your shrubbery grow. Look at these plants. Now this lettuce is growing, but that lettuce over there is bolting. What is bolting doing? Is seeding. It's providing seeds for next year. This was seed that we had last year. Look at this. We're letting this go to seed here. It's just a circle. We make runners off the strawberries. We're feeding all that with our rabbits. We're feeding all that with natural compost. All this here, all these beds that you see, This was all mixed in compost that we provided here off farm. So therefore, if you're buying some topsoil or you're having to get some brought in, it's not costing you nearly as much as supplemental, because you're, again, raising your seeds. Now you're providing your own fertilizer. That's a game changer. It allows you to know that you're not affected by all the things that's going on in this crazy world that we're living in. You are now being proactive instead of reactive of having to spend more money to grow these gardens. Now, we are talking about gardens more than anything and survivorship, but a lot of times we see in our homesteading community and being more self-sufficient, or however you're saying that we're going to be sustainable on farm with proteins and meats. Look at this grass. Now, we're grazing a lot of animals on grass, but because we use rotational intense grazing methods and use our chickens to feed our ground, this is no fertilization. This is no fertilization other than naturally coming out the back end of that cow or the back end of those chickens, and they're mixing it all up on the grounds that's here. Look at it. It's over their bellies. It is literally up their back worth of grass. Now, is that every field? No, because they just come off some fields. But because we're doing the methods of growing our own fertilization, it allows these fields to not have to need all the things that people have to put on there. If we're having to feed all these fields with synthetic fertilization, our feed bill would go up astronomical for grass-fed beef, because ultimately we're having to provide all the fertilization on these fields that there's no reason for it, especially if you're grazing like we are. So we'll graze this down. Here's what's so cool. You see that? It's making seed. This grass is making seed. So whatever they don't eat, this mature grass that they're not eating, it is making seed to go back with their fertilization back on the ground that's been walked on, trampled on, and also rested. It allows it to make for better cattle fields. This just 2 years ago was a big pine thicket, so this field's not as good as some of the others. So the reason we're letting it go a little taller is because we want these seeds to naturally go back into the earth, and I'm not having to buy Bahia or Bermuda seed. It's providing itself, and then we're providing the natural manure out the back end of those cows to then have free fields looking really good with grass up to my knees or even up to my thigh. I'm very passionate when it comes to the seed saving and fertilization. Now let's get to point 3, which is the fun one, and we're gonna go on the other side of the farm and talk about it. We still have a lot of old-time farmers in our areas that look at us and they're naysayers when it comes to the way we raise our animals and our cattle, because we're not using fertilization, or we're using unfertilized hay, or the way we rotate is kind of stupid and extra work. And I used to argue with them. I used to try to find ways to explain the way I did it. But now we're gonna let them just keep on buying their fertilization. We're gonna let them keep on spending their money. And ultimately, I'm gonna have clover fields and these grass fields that I'm not paying anything for. I'm just letting the animals be animals and naturally feeding the earth, having true regenerative agriculture on this farm. That's what matters to us. And so I don't even argue anymore. I just say, hey, come look at the farm. If you like it, I can show you how we do it. If you don't like it, that's okay. Keep spending your money on your fertilization and your seeds. Lastly, third point, we are at our corn. I love this side of the farm because it's beautiful. I always catch the sunrise when I'm over here doing chores. It's about 6:30 in the morning, so it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous morning. You can hear the birds chirping. The pigs are going crazy because they just got fed and now they're eating and enjoying it. But this is the second corn plot. That's a soybean plot that's not doing the best in the world. But guess what? We're not dependent on it because there's a whole mess of other corn. There's a whole mess of other beans and peas planted over on the other side of the farm. Third point, grow what you need. Find out what you need for a family of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Then multiply it at least by 10 to 15% and grow more. You need to learn to put up food and preserve it. You need to find ways to preserve it. So we're going to be doing a video on a lot of forms of preservation that we're using here on the farm, because ultimately if you are putting up food right now, it is going to be cheaper to grow it now, put it up now, and eat it in a year from now compared to what it's going to cost you to buy that same food at the store. So this corn plot, some of it's doing great, some of it is still far behind, but guess what, we're depending on this to do well. But then we have a whole nother set of corn growing. We're depending on those soybeans to grow over there, but we have a whole nother set of peas and beans over there. We want these blueberries and blackberries to do good, and these grapes and these mulberries to do good, but then we have a whole mess of fruits growing over there with the strawberries and the blueberries. You want to have an abundance, so therefore you're not dependent on buying more. So if you're raising your own seed, you're having sustainability with your gardens. If you're providing your own fertilization by having animals provide the fertilization for you, these plots were made by the pigs and smoothed out by the pigs and added nitrogen by the pigs. Guess what though? If we didn't have that, grow greens right here, grow winter peas right here, grow some kind of beans right here, and you're adding nitrogen to the soil. So you're still not needing any kind of synthetic fertilization. So that's point 2. And point 3, grow 10 to 20% to even 30 or 40 or 50% more than you think you need, because ultimately if you have got food put up, then you're not worried about the inflation, the food shortage, and all the things that go along with trying to grow a garden and having the stress of that. Now, that being said, we can never grow too much. We are always trying to grow more and more and more. But to know that we have it, we're still eating on last year's potatoes. Probably 50 cans of food that we've had off last year's garden. We have tons of other foods in the freezer from last year. But that doesn't stop us from growing bigger and better plots, because ultimately we're providing food for ourselves. We're hedging against inflation by providing the food and putting it up. We're not having to use fertilization because ultimately we're providing it off farm. And thirdly, we want an abundance, so that way the stresses of this world won't affect us. Guess what? If we don't eat it all, say it starts going bad and we can't eat all this food, we have so much food we don't know what to do with it. It gives it to your animals. Your animals can then use it and provide more compost and manure, can provide more food for you, because those hams, I do like bacon a little bit more than I probably like peas and carrots. So I'm okay with letting my gardens grow, and they provide those pigs for bacon and hams. Same way, sometimes when the gardens are getting nipped, that means I probably have a deer coming in the gardens. Well, come deer season, if this garden produces fine, lean venison red meat, I'm okay with that. Guys, learn to do things that can save you money. This is a way that you can have a sustainable garden by having these 2 things to allow you to have the third of abundance. Use these tips to say, you know what, I want to gain more wisdom, I want to be better. Don't let all this time stress you. Learn from it, grow from it, be better and wise, because ultimately we're providing for our family without having to pay anything extra. God bless. Happy homesteading, y'all.